Good morning, everyone. Hello. Hi. No, I know it's a little bit like when we, at least, in our classrooms, trying to get everybody's attention. It is lovely to see you here. Thank you. Well, we have faculty, staff, and students, and I love that mix because that sort of represents our entire UMass Boston community. My name is Rajni Srikant. I'm the Dean of Faculty here, also a faculty member in the English department, and I teach as well for the Human Rights program and the Critical Ethnic and Community Studies program. So I'm really, really happy to see you all here. And before we get started on, sort of delving into, I love the title of our conference, and I will tell you who coined it very soon, The Good, the Bad, and the Unknown. I think that really does represent our own sort of sentiments about AI. We should really sort of embrace that phrase in that spirit of both sort of acknowledging the good that AI can do, being cautious about what we know are problems with it, and feeling a sense of discovery about the unknown. Yeah. Okay, so before we get started with everything, I want to introduce the team that put this conference together, because you all know that nothing of this magnitude ever gets done by one person. So I'm going to start actually by inviting up here, and each member of the team, when I call your name, please come up here, because it is important that people see who you are. Apurva Mehta, who is really our leader. Come on, Apurva. Apurva is our associate CIO, and we all promised we would embarrass him because he's amazing. But really, he leads us so incredibly deftly and gently. So thank you, Apurva. Yeah. Is Professor Wei Ding here? Oh, she hasn't come yet. Okay, so if she comes before we finish this introductory part, I will introduce you to her. The next person I'd like to call up is Gail Stubbs. And Gail Stubbs, soon to be Dr. Gail Stubbs, is our Assistant Vice Provost of Student Equity, Access, and Success. And she is getting she's getting her PhD from our Leadership in Higher Education doctoral program. So one more hand for Gail. I'd like to invite Professor Jackie Lageson, who is a faculty member in the Sociology Department and also the co-director of the Center for Innovative Teaching. And Jackie is the person who coined our title for today's conference. Zach Ronald, where is Zach? Come on in, Zach. He is manager of, I want to say, innovation and learning design, Technovator, Makerspace, and all of the stuff out there that looks very cool is sort of Zach's domain. So thank you. I'd like to invite up Teresa Macera. Teresa is head of reference outreach and instruction at the library. And this conference has a lot of library staff involved in the planning. And so I really want us to remember that a library is an integral and crucial component of a university. So thank you, Teresa. And in the same spirit of celebrating our librarians, I'd like to invite up E.K. Lee. E.K., where are you? E.K. is our system development librarian. Pleasure to have you here as well. Irene Yukananov. Irene, where are you? Come on up. And Irene is part of our learning design team, and I think the digital instructional leadership and e-learning instruction and support. I think I got all of that correct, did I not? Thank you. Wonderful. She's a know-it-all. Oh, okay. And I know many of you have had the pleasure and the opportunity to work with our learning design team, and they're amazing, so thank you. Yeah. I also want to acknowledge our AV team, and please come up to the front. I know you're supposed to be out there in the back kind of taking care of things, but Mike DiFilippo, Mike, please. Lauren Lewis, come on, Lauren. And Jack Tan, come on, Jack. What is Chris's last name?
Rene.
Chris Rene, come on. And you probably saw our two graduate students at the registration desk. I want to acknowledge them too. Surabhi Puri, who is a doctoral student in the Curriculum and Instruction Department, and Ruth Guerra, who is a graduate student, doctoral student in the Applied Linguistics Department. So you can see just this incredible team that we have here, and thank you, all of you. Been a pleasure, and we've been meeting every week for how long? 3 months. Okay, there you go. So yes, wonderful, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Gail. Gail? Gail? Gail?
Thank you so much, everyone. Hello? Okay. Lance, can you come up here and join me, please? Thank you so much, Rajani. I'm really thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker, Lance Eaton. Lance is the Director of Faculty Development and Innovation at College Unbound in Providence, Rhode Island. He's also a part-time instructor at North Shore Community College. And he's also my classmate in the a PhD candidate in the higher education program in the Department of Leadership and Education right here at UMass Boston. So excuse me for a minute while I carefully read what his dissertation research is about, because I want to make sure to get this right. His dissertation research focuses on how scholars engage in academic piracy. His work engages with the possibility of digital tools for expanding teaching and learning communities while considering the various deep issues and questions that educational technologies open up for students, faculty, and higher education as a whole. He has given talks, written about, and presented at conferences on artificial intelligence, generative tools in education, academic piracy, open access, OER, open pedagogy, hybrid flexible learning, and digital service learning. He also has a blog where you can read his musings, reflections, and ramblings on AI and education. And in the schedule that you received in an email, you'll find the URL for his blog. So please join me in welcoming Lance Eaton.
Thank you so much. All right. So, can you hear me? Is this on? Cool. So thank you. So happy to be here. It's an honor. And it feels like this perfect circle of just so many things in my life, and part of that is just UMass Boston. But before we do anything else, what I'm going to have folks do is get out a piece of paper. It's not a pop quiz, I promise, but get out a piece of paper and a writing utensil of some sort, and you don't put your name on it, right? Nobody's putting their name on it, and it's something you've got to be able to like hand off to other folks. And so what I'm going to have you put on that piece of paper is what's on the right side of the screen. Something bad about, I'm going to fall over before I even start. Something bad about AI, something good about AI, and something unknown. And for folks on Zoom, the directions for you should be popped into the chat, and you'll be doing a Jamboard, and you can follow the directions there. But I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to write these down. You don't have to write down a novel, just a sentence for maybe each of kind of where you are and what you're thinking. Some of us are having moments of when we're in class and we ask students to do this, and they're like, what do you mean they don't have pens and pencils or paper? So just your initial thoughts about something bad about AI, something good about AI, something unknown about AI that you are grappling with. It doesn't have to be the big existential world at large. All right, about another minute. I know that minute went fast.
If we know what's unknown, can it be unknown?
Yeah, your unknown can be like, I don't even know what to not know about AI. Absolutely, we can go meta. All right, like another 30 seconds. Something unknown. Oops, yep.
Something unknown.
Something unknown, like something you don't know or you're trying to figure out about AI.
Oh,
I know. Didn't come expecting it to do work. I'm sorry. That's how we're doing it. All right. So what we're going to do now, folks can finish up their last, again, just a sentence at most, finish up your last one. For the next minute, and this is going to probably require people to get up and move around, is you're going to trade off the paper in your hand as much as possible. The goal here is to not end up with your own paper and really have no clue whose paper you have. So start trading. I know. This is where it gets a little frenetic. It's a little more energy than we were expecting. As many as it takes for you to have no clue. Another 30 seconds. For those on Zoom, sorry for the chaos. Sure. Yeah. All right, you can return to your seats. You can, if you've traded enough, you can return to your seats. There we go. Whew. All right, if we could find our seats, that'll be great. If we could find our seats, that'd be great. If we can find our seats, that'd be awesome. We're about to get back into it. Thank you so much. Whew. Good morning. Do we got a little more energy right now? Yeah. People weren't expecting, yeah, right? Awesome. So thank you for entertaining me and hopefully yourselves with that. Some of it was to just kind of get up and moving around, and some of it was for an activity we'll be doing throughout this. So I'm Lance Eaton. I'm here to talk about generative AI in education. I know that's a big spoiler alert, but I'm going to talk about it in two distinct ways. In one, and I hope that, actually I know that the way I will be talking about it today is uniquely grounded in the value, the skills, and the force that comes from getting and providing an education here at University of Massachusetts, Boston. So one way I'm going to be talking about it, as you've already seen, is at times we're going to be interacting. It's going to be a little bit more engagement. Nobody wants me to just sit here and talk for 20 minutes nonstop. I certainly don't want that. Most of us don't want that. I'm just being honest. Like we understand this, right? So that means I'm going to need all of you. I'm going to need your focus, your attention, your willingness to be here engaging in ideas in this room. Make no mistake, whatever comes after this talk, like I can come in here, I can do this talk, we can get really excited, but whatever I do here, it's almost a moot point. It's what happens after this. And so I just strongly encourage, and what I'll talk about time and again, is it is about the room. It is not just about somebody coming in to help us figure out the good, the bad, and AI. It's everybody here that's going to help us do that. The second way I'm talking about generative AI is a way that entails me telling you a story that is both my story and UMass Boston's story. It's a story of why and how I've become somehow this like national speaker and writer on generative AI in education. And this comes from my work and my education here at UMass Boston. Because without this foundation of criticism, optimism, and willingness to navigate the ambiguity that is education, higher ed, all of that, I wouldn't be able to help others. And that happens because of all of you here. That happens because of this institution. And that happens because of our willingness to really think about learning in ways that aren't just about rote memorization. So in order to actually tell this chronologically, I actually have to start with the bad. And that's not a reference to the degree. It's more a reference to like the critical exploration that we're about to take a look at. So my journey started at UMass Boston 20 years ago when I started in the American Studies program. I got a master's in American Studies, and I'd been an honor student all my life because I'm a nerd, and this program broke my brain. It was really hard, and it was challenging, and it just brought a lot of new critical ideas, analyses, and understandings that over the 2 years, it's like I could feel my brain getting bigger. Not my ego was shrinking, but my brain was getting bigger and just feeling just how much more intellectually understanding I was seeing the world. So the American Studies was pivotal to me to more deeply develop this critical lens on the world, a lens to see the systems of power, and understand systematic racism, patriarchy, class warfare, and many other axes of inequality that exist in our world today. It sent me to explore these ideas in the world in front of us, whether that is popular culture or technologies or education, the places that sometimes it is invisible to us or made invisible to us. These skills of analyzing power, they take time to develop, and they often need to happen in relationships and community. It can't just be information. It can't be Freire's banking model of knowledge, right? It has to be in relation. So studying American Studies has continually helped me to unearth the bad, the problematic, and the alienating aspects that permeate all around us. Such lessons and skills need a diversity of voices and experiences to help us make sense of things, to understand the lived experiences of others, and how power and systems play roles in constructing their reality and experiences. So what does this have to do with AI? Well, AI is the bad part, right? This is the bad part of talking about AI. So I'd actually like to hear from folks here. I want somebody willing to, with the paper in front of them, tell me what's something bad about AI. What do we got? Right here?
Students may rely on AI for answers rather than finding/thinking about the answers. Parentheses, less critical thinking.
Okay. Students may be relying on finding the answers rather than using critical thinking to figure out answers. Absolutely. What else do we got?
It interferes with students discovering things on their own.
Interferes with students discovering things on their own.
Students trusting their own thinking.
Students trusting their own thinking.
What's bad about that?
That's the bad. Students aren't able to, like, yes, yep.
Okay,
Thank you for, yeah. Students not trusting their own thinking. Thank you for the clarification. We'll go with one more.
It takes or replaces jobs for people.
It replaces jobs for people. All right. So like we know there's a lot of bad things about it, right? And we can't ignore that. So for me, a lot of what I think about is like, I am interested in AI. I clearly have done a lot of work in talking around AI, but I'm also really skeptical of it, right? AI flattens context, texture, and nuance. It isn't a weaver of language like humans do. It's this machine that uses just what I could only call brute force probability to stamp out words, sentences, and paragraphs together like steel plates. AI speaks in this unified voice, but with bias on different levels. So there is no I in AI, right? It remains a collection of words that are infused with a variety of biases. And those biases are the sources that the large language model uses. Those biases are in the random way the outputs are created, and the biases of the companies that use or have created these AI tools in terms of their approach to moderation. Not saying any of the, not saying something like that, there shouldn't be some bias, but we know those things are happening, and therefore we have to be suspect of that. AI is a tool, AI can reply to us, but can't respond to us. Right? AI is never going to make the case to help us understand another person individually, contextually, culturally, or systematically. It's calculating its reply, and therefore can't actually touch us in the ways that other humans can. And then AI is a tool of hyper-productivity for productivity's sake. Right? We know this is a tool created within a capitalist structure to make work faster, but never make lesser work, right? We will have to produce even more, and inevitably the things that whatever we're producing are just going to be fed into other AI machines for other people to process, right? So there is this feedback loop of productivity that this plays directly into. And then AI has some real-world, tangible harms, and that's the thing we have to grapple with. It has significant environmental costs. It's a massive act of appropriation of ideas, works, and insights by people who will never be credited. And how companies design content moderation of AI tools has largely been at this point through the exploitation of marginalized workers. So as we get into this and we are interested in this future where AI is, we have to hold all of these things, right? We have to recognize that this is our world, and historically, these things have never been enough to keep the world from barreling forward. So we need to both be aware of it and know that it's going to happen, and really try to figure out how we talk about it, how we navigate what we know is going to happen inevitably. And that's what American Studies taught me. It taught me that hiding from the truth of how things are will not help me and will not help the world. So moving into the good. And this is where I start to talk about my master's degree in instructional design from UMass Boston. So this degree further empowered me to engage technologies in general and in educational technologies more specifically. It helped me to think about the trade-offs of technology and its place in education. Because make no mistake, for millennia, all education has entailed technology, right? We might have called that technology different things. We might have called it quill and papyrus. We might have called it blackboard and books. But we have always been enmeshed in technology. And that technology always comes with trade-offs, right? There is always something we have to figure out of what's best. Right? Because technology does some cool things. Technology allows me right now to be talking to you and you being able to hear me well through the mic system. It allows a bunch of people from their homes or maybe just their offices across campus to be zooming in and hearing my words. So there's ways in which it can actually really do some cool things of bridging. But there are trade-offs to that, right? And that's the thing we have to remember. And for me, when I think back to American Studies and generative AI, somebody mentioned students don't trust their thinking. When I was a first-gen graduate student in American Studies trying to learn about Michel Foucault, I was broken, okay? No amount of reading History of Sexuality, Volume 1, was going to make it make sense to me. In fact, it took me 13 years to actually be able to read that. And the reason I was finally able to read that is because the audiobook came out, and I am much more I'm an audiobook nerd, right? I would have loved to have the Foucault bot. Now, I know Foucault would have all sorts of stuff to say about it, but the fact is, I was sitting in a class day after day with folks who are deep into and apparently have loved Foucault for years. And I was, I think I first called him Foucault, whatever. Right, so I had no knowledge, and I did not get enough. There was no space for me as that student to ask stupid question, and I use this ironically, I use this with air quotes, stupid question after stupid question. I would have loved to have a bot to work with to figure this out, but it wasn't there. And so that idea of trusting my own thinking, again, thinking happens often in a relationship, it happens in context. And if I'm surrounded by other people who are, and it's grad school, it has all sorts of layers to it, that would have been an amazing thing for me to better understand and be able to step into that conversation more effectively. So I really do think there is something of value here in how we think about this as a tool and its place in learning. So back to all of you. Give me something that you have that's good about AI. It can summarize huge chunks of info. Let's face it, we get those user end agreements that none of us read. It's kind of like a syllabus, none of us read, that has all sorts of questionable things in it. And sure enough, it can oh, I should watch out for this. I'm handing over my soul.
Can help you think of creative ways to organize, express, and articulate your ideas.
Creative ways to organize, think through, and express your ideas. Absolutely. When it can act as that second brain, it can act as that dialogue partner when there aren't other people to be able to do that in a same time, same space. Any others? Helps with accessibility needs for people with disabilities, or just everybody for that matter. It is the subtitle effect, we have, or closed caption effect, where closed captions are used by more by people who don't need them for hearing than those who do. One more.
Saves companies money.
Saves companies money, right? That's a double-edged sword. I already heard a few people over here were like, "Rrr." But there are some interesting questions about where and how that money what is done with that money. But yes, there's ways individuals and companies will save time with it. Absolutely. So again, while I'm skeptical, by the way, these are my pets if you haven't figured that out. Nobody was smiling. I'm like, come on, these are adorable. Oh, but that's entirely her MO. She knows she's in charge, right? Oh yeah. Yep. You're spot on. You've got her. This is why I use this picture. This is her attitude. So while I'm skeptical of generative AI, I can still see some of the values in it. So AI can have an answer for things more quickly and at times more accurately than I will ever be able to. Right? We are surrounded by millions of things that we do not understand. How many of us actually understand how a toilet works? I keep trying to think my way through it. Right? A handful of people, right? We use this tool every day, and most people cannot explain it. And so, I keep trying to think my way through it. I keep trying to trust my thinking, but no, I don't. I don't have enough of the physics and the engineering back, in my head. So I can ask that question. Right? Many of us don't know how the internet works, even though by this point in the day you've used it probably 1 million times. At least 8 of you in this room are checking your email right now on the internet, right? Where people are on Zoom here. We don't understand these things, but we can much more quickly get understanding of them. And I think that's a really powerful tool. I think that's a really powerful opportunity. And yes, it can be wrong. But I also know, there's way more things I'm going to be wrong about than generative AI. That's just a fact. And I have to use critical thinking, but I also have to accept, it's going to know how a toilet works well before I do. It can provide guidance, and I think this is really useful. It can provide us with this opportunity to get outside of our head and challenge our assumptions and misunderstandings. This is what I really like about these chatbots is I can put in things and I can get feedback that helps me figure out oh, that's a perspective I didn't think about, or that's a way of organizing this information I didn't think about. The thing I really like about it is because it is this collection, or because a lot of the large language models take so much from the net and make it into some means of coherence, I find it can open up the hidden curriculum of the world. And I think about this particularly when it comes to resumes, cover letters, and the whole job search application, because there are numerous hidden curriculums in all industries. And being able to use a tool like this to unearth them more effectively is just so helpful. And it's helpful for a lot of different reasons. Like the resume and cover letter are two of the like most overly rhetorically nuanced in some ways meaningless pieces of work that we all have to do that creates this gateway to a job. And realistically, all the things you have to do for that often have nothing to do with the job, right? And so there's so many of these other things in there that you can tap into, and that's something I appreciate and I find useful time and again. And then AI can actually help us be more critical about our information, which sounds weird, I know. People are like, no, because people are putting in to their papers, like, I'm just a large language model, right? Like you've had those assignments, right? The student turns in the paper and the paper's telling you they're a large language model. But here's the thing, if we frame this and we have this conversation, think of it like this. If I have a pitcher of water right here, and I tell you that it has 1 drop of poison in it, and you all have cups, how many people are going to drink their cup? Right? That's the framework we can bring, is if we help people understand it can be poisonous, right? You may get a glass of water that's just dandy, or you may get poisoned. That does make us be more skeptical of all the things. So it does help. We can leverage it to help us be more thoughtful about all information. And that's something we know we've been dying to do. And it was something librarians have been working like hell for decades to help us think about. It's not just access to information, but it's how we think about that information. And then it really, it can be an effective collaborator to move through some things, especially the tedious things. My partner loves to be like, hey, ChatGPT, I have these ingredients. What is a low-hanging fruit? What is something I can do in 20 minutes that hits these types of things? And boom. And there's lots of things we can find this to do. This is that saving time thing of I know I got to do it. I know I got to put a little bit of time into it, but there's ways that it can be helpful. So yes, each of these come with caveats, but that's true again with every technology, every pedagogy, and every strategy we use to improve education. We can't avoid those trade-offs. And so this is what the instructional design program at UMass Boston taught me. It helped me to better see, to better evaluate the opportunity and possibility of these technologies while keeping in mind the best ways to implement them for effective and meaningful learning. Again, that's a lesson, I can say this firsthand, that just reverberates through the bones of this university. Seeing these challenges, these opportunities, and navigating through them is what UMass Boston does best. So again, I know I just gave you the good and the bad, and there's probably a little bit of disorientation being like, these could almost be reflections of each other, right? That's real. That is why it's called the good and the bad. And we're gonna feel that with this new technology as we figure out where it's going. And that actually leads us well into, of course, the unknown. And so this is where I actually talk about my current pursuit of a PhD in higher education. Like generative AI, so much about what comes next in higher education is unknown. And that's probably including if I'll successfully defend my dissertation in September. So wish me luck. But navigating uncertainty is the core part of both of the program that I'm in and higher education as a whole. The program has brought this very thoughtful and critical lens to this thing we call higher education. We have examined higher ed through this lens of social justice and consider what do we do with this intersection of infrastructures. Man, that was a lot of alliteration and complicated words. I should have rethought that line. But this intersection of infrastructures of public, private, and for-profit institutions, set of beliefs about how such institutions should function or not function, and a collection of ideas about what teaching and research mean. So we are not good at the unknown, but we are often prepared for it more than we realize. We get through it time and again. And muddling through uncertainty is ultimately the history of higher education. I would love to find I would love to find some piece of research on higher education when they're like, nope, everything's hunky-dory. We've got it all figured out. We're fine. We're fine. It's not. There's always something changing us because we are trying to move through this process of time, help people in the now figure out where they want to be in the future. And there's a lot of unknowns to that. So this thing we call higher ed is messy, and well, so is generative AI, right? So this is why we're feeling that disconnect between that good and the bad. It is okay to feel all of this ambiguity, this angst, fear, certainly confusion, and I have no doubt, especially after the pandemic, for some folks, a little bit of exhaustion, if not a whole lot. But these are perennial challenges of higher ed. This is something that we know continues to happen. And so all I have to say is that, it's useful for us to acknowledge them, but also know that we can get through them. So with that, let's hear. What are some of the unknown things about generative AI? I'm going to just try to pick some folks I haven't yet.
Is it sentient? And how will we know?
Is it sentient and how will we know? That is our Terminator moment. Okay. Excellent.
Will it replace colleges / education learning in the future?
Will it replace colleges, education, or learning in the future? For sure. As in, for sure, that's a good unknown.
Will we be able to pull together and create reforms and regulations where needed?
Ooh, will we be able to pull together regulations and reforms where needed? Thank you. Any others? There we go.
Will students actually be learning? We had the whole process, everybody, when they went to things like at McDonald's to having the automatically calculate change. And then you found anytime the machines went down, the people, often the young people working there, couldn't calculate change in their head.
Yeah.
The machine was done it.
Will people actually be able to continue to learn in the ways we hope with these changes? And then last? I don't know. Perfect one to end on. Just this one big shrug emoji, right? So thank you for that. So how will AI change? This brings up a lot of interesting questions. I think one is, how will AI change power and agency in the classroom and with students? AI actually challenges us to rethink the way power and agency has existed in educational structures. We gave primacy to what, in hindsight, are faulty yet efficient means of assessment, and now we have to navigate the changing power and that changing power dynamic. How will AI be used on us as scholars and educators? Right? We wonder just as much about how it might be used on us, with or without our permission, both inside and outside the institution. We don't know what that future will hold, and that feels very uncomfortable. How will scholars and educators be expected to use AI? Right? We know, just like the LMS and email and all these other systems that you now have to work with, at some point somebody is going to be like, nope, now you got to use AI in some way. And are we ready for that? And this is back to that question, a couple of the questions that popped up of like, what will be the impact on all of us as a result of using these problematic tools? We know that we have this deeply interwoven relationship with technologies that shape our experience, lives, in the way we move through the world. Sometimes to the degree that we don't even realize that it's a technology and it becomes invisible to us, right? That we don't even realize how much and how deeply it's shaping us, and yet it is a technology that is just everywhere to the point of invisibility. So actually a quick question. What is the most ubiquitous technology around? A technology that I know everybody here in this room has? No, let me finish. Everybody here in this room has, and everybody that is on this campus or coming in through Zoom. What is the one technology I know they all have? And I don't even have to know anything about them.
A watch.
I appreciate that. I hear cell phone, that's not it.
The toilet.
The toilet, I mean, but do they own it, and will I know that they own it? Good callback, I appreciate that. Any other takers? See, this isn't a technology that is so ubiquitous and yet so invisible. And so to think about this in the context of AI is scary. It's clothing. Clothing. It is a technology. It is not just a ubiquitous technology. It is a technology that you will legally be clothed by the government if you start walking around without it. Like, it is a technology we foist on people, no matter what. Right? So this is a, I use this as a contrast. This is a thing we worry about, or is an unknown thing of how ubiquitous and central will this come. And then the final thing is like, what if this is a big nothing burger? Right? What if this is like the MOOC of the 2010s, right? Remember massively open online colleges? They were going to change and revolutionize every higher education, and now most of them are like defunct or like about to be financially bankrupt and all sorts of fun stuff, right? So there's this real question of, we still don't know if these are viable. There's various cases about the copyright issues that could easily tank or like change what we're doing with all of this. So those are a lot of unknowns. And so we sit here and we're trying to figure out the future. It's okay to acknowledge that we don't know what's next. But that's always been true. And we can look to each other to help find the way through it. So all the good, bad, and unknown are true, and yet I remain hopeful and continue to want to learn more about generative AI. The thing is, I've taught for nearly 18 years. I've taught through all of these technologies and shifts in education. In fact, many of us have. And I can't tell you what's next, but I can tell you these are the things that I've learned and have continued to lead me. Somebody's taking a photo. I'm going to give it 1 second. There we go. The slides will be shared afterwards as well. There's a link on the last slide that is to the resources and additional materials to check out. So first, where all of this leads me is to think more about my students and the worlds that they live in and the things they must figure out. Because yes, these tools are so different from what I had growing up, and yet they also make the world so much harder to sort through, right? How does a student as a knowledge worker conceive of their future when generative AI has arisen, right? How do you navigate that? I don't know, but I do know that my goal is to connect with that student as a human, recognize their challenges, and find a meaningful way through it. Their world is just as scary and alienating for them as we're feeling in this moment. Yet, we also have more agency. We have more wisdom and abilities in this moment because of where we sit to navigate and figure out from all the other things that we've had to figure out in this educational space. And so for me, that means I'm able and willing to figure out what comes next with them. For me, a new technology is an opportunity to reevaluate what is true, what is doable, and what is relevant to the classroom, and to do it with students. Our collective and individual goal with any technology is to figure out where this line is. Where is the line of appropriate and inappropriate use? Who gets to decide that? And how do we understand, acknowledge, and negotiate this? Because it's a moving line, and it's a line that is embedded in different places. It's embedded in individuals, it's embedded in communities, and it's embedded in cultures. We have to figure out our way through all of that. Therefore, we can't just teach the students. We actually have to learn with them, and we actually have to learn from them. So, with generative AI, we have to understand that in order to use it well, like really well, the kind of well that means a matter of life and death, a matter of certainty and critical understanding, we need what I call 2 leaky buckets. The first bucket is a working understanding of how generative AI works, its limitations, its capabilities, and how it fits into the larger cultural landscape of late-stage capitalism. That's all. That's essential to knowing what it is and isn't, can and can't do. But more importantly, it's important for just sifting through the promises of a lot of tech bros from Silicon Valley and a lot of business hype selling us a variety of products that will solve all of our problems. And I'm going to take a hit at, generative AI detectors is a prime example of entities just trying to make a quick buck off a thing that doesn't work. The second bucket is a deep knowledge of the subject matter, of the discipline that you're working on. It just doesn't, generative AI just doesn't know things, right? It only calculates responses. And that can only get so far. So when it comes to disciplinary knowledge, it still falls drastically short. Yes, it can produce facts, but it can't necessarily produce knowledge. So as leaky buckets, like we actually have to continue to re-immerse ourselves in these two things. We know this in terms of scholarship. We have to continually read, but we also have to kind of keep updating our own internal models of generative AI. What we knew about generative AI 18 months ago versus 12 months ago versus 6 months ago, there's a lot of moving pieces there that we have to keep in mind. So what we actually need is critical analytical skills to really navigate its outputs. It's the thing that education has often provided. And again, I can say this firsthand, it's a thing that UMass Boston has amply done and done well. And yes, we have to do this work with students and aid them to understand these two leaky buckets together in conversation, in community, and even at times in tension with those students. So this is no easy task, right? There's no ubiquitous technology that hasn't initially instilled what's called a techno panic, right? For those of us that remember, the internet made us stupider. Video games made us violent. Comic books created a whole generation of juvenile delinquents. A disembodied voice from the radio was going to rot our brains. Did that show up? There we go. And then the last one, the penny, the penny dreadfuls and dime novels of the 1800s sent us all into a tizzy. And let's not forget the original sinful technology, the one that Socrates himself had all sorts of criticism of writing, right? All technologies are problematic. They scare the hell out of us. They challenge us. And also, as we look back at all of these, we know, that's not quite what we thought it was. So all of these change learning and culture. We don't have to panic about it, but we do have to think about it. Rather than panic, we have to persist. Rather than dismiss it, we have to navigate it, its uses for ourselves, our students, our culture. In the end, what I wish for all of you here to consider is that I've been a student at UMass Boston for a generation. And now that I'm saying that aloud, that doesn't quite sound right. Let me try that again. I have several degrees from UMass Boston over the last 20 years. Right? I'll take it. And they've all led me in the right direction time and again. It had less to do with the content and more with how people connected with me. The learning happens inside and outside the classroom and has less to do with papers and completing tasks and more about forming relationships and further developing thinking and understanding. UMass Boston does this fantastically. And you really should believe me because I might actually have a doctorate soon from a fantastic university. But seriously, in these halls exist folks who have fine-tuned my criticism of power and systems, sparked my curiosity and appreciation of technology and learning, and helped me make sense of the nonsensical, that is, higher education, and now generative AI. We don't have to have the answers to generative AI. We don't have to have the answers to what generative AI will bring to our professions and to our practices. But we do have allies and collaborators, and we should all be digging in, learning, sharing, and gaining more clarity together. We'll only be able to harvest what good there is by having all of us work together to figure out what the bad is and continually pushing further to the periphery what the unknown is. The room is always smarter than the individual. This room is no different. So I would also encourage you to continue to think about your classrooms. They are no different. I know we're there as leaders and educators in that space, but our students are learning and figuring out just as much. They are not the blank slates we sometimes like to think they are. So what I would encourage you is to continue attend events like these. Continue to be in formal and informal rooms, and to share, learn, explore, play, and figure this out with one another, with those not in this room, and with your students. That's the only way forward, and quite frankly, it's better than any other alternative I could imagine, and certainly better than anything generative AI could do. So thank you very much.